Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Hi, we're back. One of the big controversial topics on the ballot this year is ballot item 15-119, and it deals with GMOs. Delighted to have in the studio with us. It's been a long time since we've had Lynn in, but Lynn Barton's with us today. She is a caretaker of a small hobby farm. She's also a tutor of classical conversations, homeschooling mom. In fact, you say your son's graduating this year?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Her and her hubby, Brad, have a small farm, and they farm hay and orchard, a small orchard, vegetable garden, chickens, raise a few steers for their own beef production. So this, I know you're very passionate about this. What is a GMO?
Okay. A genetically modified organism is a plant. Well, this is not all of genetic engineering. Just talk about GMO plants.
Okay.
So it's created by taking the DNA from another plant or an animal or possibly a virus or bacteria. It's done in the lab. It's inserted into the plant that they're engineering to attain a specific trait that they want to get. And so it's fundamentally different from plant breeding because you're mixing different kinds of species, and it would never happen in nature. You're not always mixing different species, but you're mixing, you're overcoming the natural processes of plant breeding and doing it in the lab to create this plant that has the traits you want. For instance, one of the most popular ones is corn or soybeans. They are Roundup resistant, so you can spray your whole entire field with Roundup and it will only kill the weeds, but your soybeans and your corn will stand and continue to grow.
All right. Now, you are defending yes on 15-119. And clarify this, because sometimes a yes means a no and a no means a yes. And so tell us your position and what it is.
Well, the measure says that after a year, you will no longer be allowed to grow genetically modified crops in Jackson County.
After a year.
Yeah, so there's a year to make that change over, that transition.
The danger of a GMO to those who are organic is what?
Well, it's not just to our organic growers, but also to conventional growers.
Okay.
But the problem is, well, there's a number of problems, but the main problem we're dealing with is pollen drift. So you can't keep your pollen on your property. And so the way this all got started was Chris Hardy, who's an organic farmer in Ashland, was wanting to lease some more land, and he found out that this plot of land was already being leased by Syngenta. And now Syngenta is a genetically modified grower out of Switzerland, and by the way, they're not even allowed to grow in their own country. Yeah. But anyway, they were growing sugar beets, GMO sugar beets, within a mile of his property, and so he had to plow under his crop because he could no longer guarantee that his crop would be organic. Wow. And so anyone who is growing any crop that could pollinate, could interpollinate, because it's the same type of plant, if they don't want a GMO plant, they can't be assured of protecting themselves because pollen travels on the wind and with the bees and the birds.
Now, it's also true, I've heard, that some of the GMOs that are grown aren't accepted in other countries. They're rejecting them. That's
true. And of course, the other thing that's happening is that, for instance, last year we found wheat, GMO wheat, in an Oregon farm that wasn't supposed to be there. And there isn't even any approved GMO wheat to sell.
And that condemned the whole load, didn't it?
And so all the wheat farmers, including Jared Waters here in the Rogue Valley, they lost their entire wheat crop because Japan and Korea would no longer take any wheat from Oregon. And they kept that ban for several months. So that cost them a lot of money.
All right, so basically, let's go on the spiritual side of this just for a moment. Are we fooling around with God's creation? Is that what we're doing here?
Well, I think so. So when I look at the Bible, and I was thinking, how do you think about this from a biblical perspective?
I mean, we're cloning cows and dogs, and we're trying to do humans, and we're basically doing this with plants now, right?
Yes, and we always adopt new technology just because we can, and we never ask, should we, or how should we do it? And science is totally unequipped to answer those types of philosophical questions. And so when I look at Scripture, and I read in Genesis 1 that God created, the animals and the plants and the creeping things, He always said He created them after their own kinds. Right. And He said that several times, and then He also said it was good. Yeah. And then we know in Leviticus 19 that you're not supposed to mate. God says don't mate species of different animals. And we know if we even try that with a horse and a donkey, we only get one generation because the offspring is infertile. But now that limitation has been overcome. And that's another big risk of the GMOs, because it changes the DNA of that plant, and then it spreads into the environment, and you can't take it back.
All right. Some of the argument of the other side is, well, we can't. This is going to cut into budgeting, management. You're going to have policemen become farm cops. I mean, I've heard the drill, and I don't know. Is that true?
No, it's not true at all.
Okay.
So the way this ordinance was written is it's based almost word for word on the pear ordinance that we already have that's been working really well for a long time, which says, if you're not going to maintain your pear orchard, you need to pull up the trees so they don't become a pest magnet.
Right.
And in fact, this new ordinance adds extra protection because you can't go on someone's property without a warrant under the new ordinance. That's not the case with the old ordinance.
Okay.
So it's not going to be an issue of, people having government inspectors, invading their property. And the other issue is it's already been passed. Bans have been passed in California in 3 counties. 2 of them had GMOs in them already, so 1 they weren't there yet. Yeah. But there hasn't been any cost. And the reason is, I think a big reason is you have to sign a contract to be able to grow GMOs. And what company is going to offer for sale in a county a product that's been made illegal? Very unlikely.
And I have to ask the question, what is the marketability of a GMO if countries are turning it down? Where's this going? I mean, it sounds like the outside is eventually going to have a control on this.
Yeah, and of course the argument is we're a bunch of anti-science Luddites, and, we're environmental extremists, and we're trying to, keep farmers from growing what they want to grow. But it's true, the more people learn about it, the less they want them. And so they are going to have problems with selling GMOs over time.
Have we ever done the science on the purity of a GMO? I mean, I'm going to skip ahead. There seems to be cancer's epidemic, and we know that a lot of it has to do with stress. But what about our general food supply? Are we messing around here?
Well, I think we are, but of course we don't know.
Yeah.
The GMOs were approved by the FDA as generally recognized as safe, GRAS. Of course, the head of the FDA at that time was Michael Taylor, who was a former Monsanto lawyer. Monsanto is one of the biggest GMO researchers and producers. Yeah. But all the studies are short-term. So we can assume that, we know nobody's dropping dead from GMOs, obviously.
Yeah, right,
but long-term, we don't know what the long-term consequences are. And meanwhile, they're taking over our food supply in a big way. At least in corn, basically, if you don't buy organic corn, it's 90% genetically modified. So if you drink a Coke or tortilla chips or anything like that, you're eating genetically modified food. And we just don't know.
All right, the other argument I'm hearing is, well, if I want to use Roundup, I should be able to use Roundup.
Well, you should.
Does that play into this at all?
Well, one of the models of the Roundup Ready corn and soybeans, it actually allows you to use more Roundup. And now what we're having problems with is super weeds, because the weeds are becoming resistant to the Roundup, so you have to use more and more. And now they're having to rotate to different chemicals. And I don't even want to get into the issues of water and things like that over time, but the super weeds also are not going to stay on the farms. They're going to end up in our gardens, and they don't stay where they
So the
first started.
pesticide is just one of the things they threw into the argument that really isn't a factor. All right, so I'm hearing now that true farmers are waking up and saying, wait a minute, why should I even go down this road if down the road I can't sell it? So
well, I hope that's the case. It's becoming very contentious, and I'm really sad about that.
Yeah. It really has divided the county in many ways.
It really has.
Yeah.
And my neighbor across the street really disagrees with me, and that's unfortunate. But over time, if you read the news reports coming out of the Midwest, more and more farmers are getting out of it because they're having more problems than they're gaining benefits from, and their yields are going down over time. So it starts out to be a real boon, but over time you end up with unintended consequences and problems. And again, like you said, it's getting harder and harder to sell some of these crops because people just don't want them.
All right, before I run out of time, I just want to go back to a statement you made earlier, because I did not know that as part of the argument. Basically, the framework of the yes on 15-19 is already in play as it relates to the orchardists in the valley.
Yep, and it's been working really well.
Go back through that again so we understand that. Because, I mean, here we are, the pear capital of the world, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, as you know, if you stop maintaining your pear orchard, it could be a real problem for pests that will cause problems with other orchardists if you don't spray and maintain your orchard. So the ordinance says if you are if you're going to stop growing, you have to pull those trees out. And we see torn up pear orchards all over the valley. It hasn't been an issue. People comply. So this ordinance, they hired an attorney to fashion the ordinance for the GMO ban to be just like the pear orchard ban, with the additional protection that you can't go on someone's property without a warrant. Now, that hasn't been a problem. Nobody's been doing that with the pear ordinance either, but just to give that extra protection.
And back to the argument of cost, other counties or states that have gotten, other counties within other states have gotten into this and have done the ban. Has there been a cost?
Well, they've called around and they're told no, very little to negligible. Sometimes they have to answer some questions, but it has not been an issue. Okay.
All right. So again, Lynn represents yes on 15-119. So yes basically means no to GMOs, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you understand that? Because it gets a little confusing. The yes on 15-119 means the ban on GMOs, and a no means there would be no ban. The other thing I've heard is, what's been very interesting to me is that most of the funds behind the yes on 15-119 has been local, and most of the funds on no have been out of state. Is that true?
The Good Neighbor PAC, I forget the exact percentage, but almost all the money has come from out of state and from some of these corporations. Also, the Farm Bureau, that is a no on this measure, 28% of their funding comes from GMO companies. So they're not exactly objective in their views. So yeah, that money's coming from out of state to try and influence what we do in our little county. And it really is an attempt at survival. You know, the organic farmers that discovered this problem, they went to the county, they went to the state agriculture department, and they went to the USDA, and nobody would help them.
Really?
And so that's why they put together this measure, because otherwise we're going to lose our whole organic farming community over time, because they're not going to be able to ensure that their crops are organic.
Can they possibly coexist?
Probably not in our valley. They've tried it. There were some meetings where they tried to pin the valley and kind of divide it up into places where GMOs would be grown and other places where they wouldn't. And the meetings ended up breaking up. And depending who you talk to, it was the other guy's fault. And I wasn't there, so I don't know what happened, but I know it failed. I also know another thing that you can do is stagger plantings. So the GMO people would plant at a different time than the organic people do, and they pollinate at a different time, and you don't have that problem. Well, that hasn't worked either. Fry Family Farms had an agreement with a local Syngenta grower to stagger the plantings, but the corporate office in Switzerland got wind of it and said, no, you plant now. You're not going to follow that agreement. And so again, the local farmer got the short end of the stick, and the staggered planting agreement didn't work.
Where do you think this is going overall? I mean, in time, it appears the argument's on your side.
Well, I'm really encouraged about the reaction in our valley and its pockets throughout the country, and even in Hawaii it's becoming very controversial. The problem is that our governments have decided that GMOs are the way to go. And so I don't really know how it's all going to play out. But if this is important to us, we need to stand up and say, no, this isn't what we want. And hopefully over time, the market forces will take care of it.
Again, I think the market forces, if you can't sell the product. So am I hearing you say that the GMOs that are being grown and sent to market are primarily for our own consumption? Other countries are saying no to it?
Yeah, I know a lot of countries are saying no. I know they're used for livestock feed and things like that. I don't know all the details, but I do know that much of Europe has banned GMOs, and of course Korea, Japan, they don't want them, and I think China too. So it's trending.
It's trending.
Yeah.
All right, so thank you, Lynn.
Thank you so much
she's
for having
representing
me.
the yes on measure 15-119, which is basically no to GMOs. So I hope you understand all of that, because today's the last day to register to vote, and the ballots come out in about 10 days. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Perry.
Okay.
Thanks for having
All right,
me.
we'll see you next time on Focus Today.